Hey everybody, Mary Rose here. Welcome back to the channel on a Wednesday when we get together live every week at 1 p.m. Pacific time to talk about story structure, writing craft, and how to thrive as a writer. I'm Mary Rose Wood. I'm going to put this down for a sec. There we go. So you can see me. I accessorized today. So why hide my light under a bushel, right? Accessories make the outfit. I'm Mary Rose Wood. I'm an author, probably best known for my middle grade books. And I'm also the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own program that trains writers by giving them the tools in story structure and writing craft to write the kind of books that made you want to be a writer in the first place. It's a wonderful community, and I hope to welcome some of you into it if you're not already part of it. I know some of my students are regulars here at the live stream, and it's always a treat to see you. So we are broadcasting live to YouTube and Facebook. If you happen to be watching in the Path of the Storyteller Facebook group, that's what that little instruction was all about. You can go to StreamYard.com/Facebook and just click so that I can see your name when you post a comment. And I hope you will post a comment. These are live for a reason. I love the give and take. I love to answer the questions that you guys pose. And I have a feeling that there may be some questions about today's topic, which is how to hack your writing process so that you can be more productive with less self-doubt. Imagine a writer having self-doubt. Crazy, no? Like a fiddler on the roof. Listen, writing and self-doubt go together like, peanut butter and chocolate. Why? That's what I'm going to talk about first. And then I'm going to give you a half a dozen tips, things to consider that you can put into practice in your own writing process that I hope will make a difference in your productivity and in the joy and confidence that you bring to the work. Okay. So first, let's talk about this idea of process. What do we mean by process? Well, books don't just fall out of the sky, right? And they don't just fall out of writers' heads either. There is a process of creation, and that process begins long before we ever set fingers to keyboard or pen to paper. It is the process of first identifying as a writer, coming to have the impulse to write. Maybe the inspiration comes from our lives as readers, which we find so rich and fulfilling and inspiring. We come across an author or a book or a series of books that just fills us with the desire to say, hey, I want to do that too. Right? You could say easily that is the beginning of your writing process because, the wish is born, the seed is planted at that moment. But that's just the beginning. What happens after that? Well, maybe we have to struggle for a long time to come up with an idea of something to write about. Maybe we have to struggle to have even the bare bones knowledge of how to begin, or maybe we just dash over and start scribbling. If we're very young, we might have that blithe beginner's mind and just get to work, which is a beautiful thing. But sometimes when we're older, the self-doubt has a little bit more say. What I do know from my own experience as a published author is that the questions that I and many of my colleagues are posed by aspiring authors, people who are back in the journey where they're maybe trying to work up the courage to write, or they're writing already and trying to get to the point of being able to do it professionally. They're trying to get a book published. They're looking for an agent. Maybe they're just trying to finish something. They've started things, but they haven't finished them. There's all these different places on the journey that you could be. But we get the same questions over and over again, and they're questions to do with process. Mary Rose, how many hours a day do you write? How long did it take you to finish XYZ book? How many words a day do you write? What time do you find it best to write? What are your tips for overcoming writer's block, etc.? there's a tremendous amount of curiosity about how writers actually sit down to work. Like, do you coffee or tea? Like, do you like to work in your pajamas? Is it better at night or in the morning? Sometimes the questions are really specific. You know, what kind of pencil do you use? Do you use a pencil? Do you type? Do you write longhand? What kind of software do you use? Or are you a Microsoft Word person or a Scrivener person? How much do you outline? Right? All of these questions, they're real. It's all process. The question underneath the question, I always like to think about that. What's the question underneath all of those questions? And it has to do with this quality of self-doubt. Everyone out there who's asking questions like that of writers that they perceive as having more experience or more success, they are fundamentally saying, I don't think I'm doing it right. I want to know what it looks like to do it right. How are we supposed to be doing this? And it's a very tricky thing, isn't it? Because writing happens inside this bony container, right? It happens inside the skull. It happens within the brain of the writer. And so, my friends, much as I would like to, open the portal and say, well, if you just watch while I'm writing, you can see how it's done and you won't have to ask me so many questions. I'm not able to do that, right? Like it's closed. So you as an aspiring writer never really get to see a professional do it. It's not like other endeavors. When we want to learn to play tennis, we can turn on, even if we don't live anywhere near a world-class tennis player, we can watch a tennis match and we can say, amazing. Look at how they do it. Look at the pace that they have. Look how fast their footwork is. Look how they extend the arm back right? We can see it done. If we have a friend who's a painter who's nice enough to let us sit invisibly in their studio while they work, although I doubt that they would, but one could, right? One could watch them as they did a little something, stood back to look, change what they've done, stood back to look, took out a sketchbook, tried a few different ways before deciding what to put on the canvas. We would have some capacity to observe their process. Writing is unique in this way, in that it's an extremely complicated task, a very complex artistic practice, but the process is so private and so interior that we never, ever, ever get to watch somebody else do it. And so, self-doubt. We have no idea if we're doing it right. And so we ask writers questions. So that's, to me, where the self-doubt comes from. It's not your fault. That's the first point I want to make to you. If you have that kind of self-doubt, it's not your fault. It's just a weird situation. You want to learn to do something really well, but you're not able to ever observe somebody else do it. There's this sense of imposter syndrome with writing that is just full bore. We just are never sure that we're doing it right. So your process is how you do it. And how do we know if it's the right process? Well, that brings me to my first tip. Self-observation. There is a classic joke. I'm sure you've all heard it a million times. Guy goes to a doctor. He says, "Doctor, it hurts when I do this." And what does the doctor say? Don't do that. That's self-observation, my friends. No great yogi could teach it better. If it hurts when you do something, don't do that. But the corollary is, if you find something that works and is sustainable, do more of that. Do more of that. So I'm going to break it down, some of the types of things that you can try and then observe to see how they work for you. But the founding principle is self-observation. You are going to find the writing process that suits you, that suits your circumstances, that suits your schedule, that suits your biorhythms, right? And that suits the project that you have and suits where you are in on the path of developing as a writer. All of these things may change over time. They may develop, they may shift. Fantastic. The process of self-observation is ongoing. You must always be curious about your own writing process. My writing process may be very different than yours, right? My optimal writing process during one season of my career may be very different than my optimal writing process during a different season of my career. The same is true for everyone. This is creative work. So right away, you have to take yourself seriously as an artist enough so that you ask yourselves these questions. Now, what questions to ask? That's what we're going to talk about. Um, One of the things that really gets writers plugged into self-doubt and confusion about how process works is that their goals are not reality based. So my first tip is self-observation. Practice it always. My second tip is to have reality-based goals. Now, notice that I don't say realistic. I say reality-based. To me, a realistic goal sounds like one that's not sufficiently challenging. We should always be striving to hit it out of the park, my friends. This is important work we're doing. You know, storytelling is super important. Books change the world. They change people's lives. When you get on the path of the storyteller, you know, you are in for a wild ride that is full of meaning. And so much of what we humans crave in life is the sense that our lives have meaning. So welcome. This is a great, compelling journey for you to take if that resonates with you. But a reality-based goal is one that is born out of some understanding of what writing is like. And here, of course, we have another conundrum, don't we? Just as we can't get inside the actual skull of our favorite writer and see the neurons firing and watch how it works, we can't look at a finished book on the bookstore shelves or on the library shelves and have any idea of how it got that way. All we see is the finished product. And the mistake that writers make is that they set themselves the unrealistic goal of sitting down to work and creating something that resembles the finished product of a book bound in hardcovers on a shelf somewhere. That is not a reality-based goal. So let me share with you what more reality-based goals might look like. When we begin to explore an idea for a story, we are just, my students will smile to hear me say it, it's one of my pet phrases, we are just making messy mud pies. We are gathering material. We are sketching in a sketchbook in blunt pencil. None of this is intended for a reader yet. We are in the early days of drafting. We're trying to sort it out. We're just collecting ingredients. We're creating a stockpile of ideas. It's if you're a knitter or a sewer, you like crafts like that, you know how exciting it is to go into a yarn store or a fabric store? It's intoxicating. You go in and it's just possibilities everywhere. And then all of a sudden you're like, I have to have that blue chenille yarn, or I have to have that beautiful, you know, hand spun something. This fabric is gorgeous. I have no idea what I'm going to make with it, but I really am excited by it. It inspires me. Okay. This is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a trip to the yarn store. When we begin work on a project, we just collect that which appeals to us, inspires us. Then we get home, right? And we lay out all the things and we start to think, well, that might make a good dress. Oh, I really could see that as a scarf, right? The process of creation of pruning down the infinite possibility of our materials into something particular begins. That is process. That is process. Another great favorite image of mine is a trip to the farmer's market. You don't know in advance what might look good, what's in season, what might be fresh, or what farmer might have a glut of incredible strawberries, and all of a sudden they're 2 for 1, right? Your plan is open. You know you want to get some yummy stuff so that you can plan menus for the next few days, but you're going to wait and see what excites you. And so you go, it's a shopping trip. You gather what inspires you, right? You bring it home, you lay it out. You start to say, "Oh, I ended up with a few eggplant here. Well, why don't I make eggplant parmesan?" Right? That's process. Now, we do this all the time in our lives, which is why I like to use these sort of familiar, everyday examples. But when we sit down to write, because we don't have realistic goals, all we know is that there are books on this shelf that are finished. They seem inevitable. You read them, they make perfect sense. There are no mistakes. The plot is streamlined. You know who the main character is from page 1. All the extraneous words and digressions, things that are not part of the story, have already been removed, ideally. We assume that that's what writers make when they sit down to work. Oh, no, no, no. It's like imagining going to the yarn store and walking out with a finished scarf that somehow magically knitted itself while you were shopping. There are many, many stages in the process of creation. All right. So your reality-based goals are going to know a few things. They're going to know what stage you are in with this particular project. If you're just getting started, you are in the drafting stage, and you might even be in the pre-drafting stage. You might be interested in a subject or a setting, or have a vague impression of a character or a type of tale. I really would love to write a murder mystery, right? Like your impulse could be anything. You're even in the pre-drafting stage. That's when you're just wandering around the store, just looking for fabrics that excite you. When that starts to take shape, this character, this story, oh, I think I'd like to set it this. I think it's about this. And you start to winnow it down and cultivate it into the essential ingredients that you might need to actually begin writing, then you're ready to enter the drafting phase. And for those of you who are interested in a talk precisely about that, how much do you need to know that you're ready to start the drafting phase? I did a whole video about that, so it's on the YouTube channel, and I'll put a link in here in the commentary below so that you can find it. For a lot of writers, this is a tricky threshold to cross, but you've got a main character, you have an idea for a story, you have a sense of what is at stake, right? You're ready to start drafting. Does that mean it's coming out now like a finished book? Oh, no. Now you are converting all this beautiful story energy that you've accumulated in your head, and you're converting it into language, which words are our materials, right? We're writers. This is what we chose. We're going to build our art out of words. So that's what we start doing. We start to draft. We put words on the page in the service of getting this story out of the ether of our imagination and onto the page. I have to tell you, my friends, it is going to be a big, messy mud pie, except this time it's made out of words. This is exciting. Get it all down. Put it into words. Draft and draft and draft and draft and draft. Okay? That's what your job is. Is your draft ready for publication? It is not. Is it going to be any good? No. Is it going to be packed with cliches? Yes. Are you going to write yourself into corners and not know how to get out? You will. All right. That's what drafting is like. That's a reality-based goal. Now, if you get through the drafting process and all is well, and you're still going, which I hope you will be, then it's time to revise. That's a very different set of expectations. What are your reality-based goals for revision? Well, one of them should be that your work needs revision. And I don't mean it needs to go through the spell check. I mean that you need to now go through and use your stores of story structure expertise and your stores of writing craft expertise to take what you've put onto the page and now really shape it. Take out the extra, make it work for the reader. In order to do this, you do need a certain amount of tools in your toolbox. You need to know how to use them. And this is why training and mentorship are so crucial to the development of a writer. It's not a realistic expectation. It's not a realistic goal to think I'm going to read a few good books and then I'm going to know how to do it. That's like saying I'm going to put the US Open on the television and then I will know how to play world-class tennis. You will be inspired to want to learn how to play world-class tennis by watching the greats. You will be inspired to want to write really, really well by reading good books, but you still have to learn to do it. You still have to put in the practice. Okay? That is another reality-based goal. Expect to have to learn how to do it. Don't expect that you can teach yourself how to do it. This sounds so obvious if I use any other type of endeavor. Learning to play a sport, learning to play a musical instrument, learning how to, do any highly skilled task. We know we need instruction and we know we need to practice in order to be fluent, to be good at it. But when it comes to writing, because of this veil of invisibility, this illusion that the books just fall out of writers' heads and end up in the store, it's an almost irresistible misconception. Very few writers don't at some point in their development have this misconception. So having reality-based goals includes knowing the difference between what drafting is really like and what revision is really like. It's not correcting spelling errors and moving commas around. It sometimes means a very deep exploration of what your story really is, what journey of transformation your hero was really on, and making sure that you're only telling that story and getting rid of all of the exploratory writing you did that doesn't have enough to do with that story. It might mean recognizing that you've have a whole cast of characters that you keep kind of circling around and you haven't even really settled on who your main character is, right? That might be substantial reworking of your draft if you've written a whole draft that has that kind of problem in it, right? So revision is on the story level and it's also on the language level. All right. And the process of gaining enough mastery in story structure and writing craft in order to be able to execute those essential jobs of revision is part of it as well. Another reality-based goal might be how much time it takes. We might imagine that people can write a book in a month, draft a book in a month, revise it in 2 weeks, good to go. And in fact, if we spend too much time on the internet, if we spend too much time reading posts that people make on social media or getting super excited about certain types of events that are unnatural, for example, NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. The whole premise of NaNoWriMo is you too can draft a novel in a month. But that's not really what they're saying. They're really trying to encourage you to devote yourself to some project, to make time to write every day. That's all terrific. I'm in favor of anything that gets people charged up and engaged, right? Committed to their writing. It's all good. But worthy novels tend not to be drafted in a month. 6 months, a year. These are reality-based expectations, depending on the book, depending on how long the book is, and again, where you are in your journey. So having a reality-based goal is about time. It's another category. So let me move on to my next tip. So far, we've got, just to review, we've got self observation, we have reality based goals. And here's the third thing: measure what matters. There's a great little saying that I'm fond of, that I came across recently, which is that we can only manage that which we measure. Now consider that. There's some aspect of your personal goals, writing or otherwise, that you want to manage. Measurement starts to become a thing, right? How many people out there are looking at their phone tracker and saying, "Did I get my 5,000 steps in today? Did I get my 10,000 steps in today?" You want to manage your health, and you want to walk more because you know it's good for you to have more movement. And the immediate impulse, if we're serious, is, well, okay, well, let me measure it. Am I walking more than yesterday, than last week? How do I know? The only way that I know is if I measure. Now, if we measure the wrong things, it's not going to be beneficial. All right. And so decide what you want to measure. Many writers think in terms of word count. They measure word count. So this sort of goes back to my opening story. How many times I've been asked the question by a writer, how many words a day do you write? How many words a day do you think I should write? Do you can I write 2,000 words a day? Is 1,000 words a day enough? Or I only wrote 500 words today. I'm terrible, right? They get very involved with the measuring of the word count. You could probably tell from this little trickster smile on my face that I'm not a huge fan of measuring word count. And here's why. Measuring word count tends to reinforce the unrealistic goals that we were just talking about. If you think that your draft is supposed to be something that's usable, you want to create 500 words of usable prose. You want to feel like you made progress. I wrote 500 words today. But if you have a more realistic belief that, no, I'm just gathering material right now. This is generative writing. I'm just generating ideas. I'm still at the fabric store shopping. What difference does it make how many words you write? That it doesn't matter. You know, it's not, we're not measuring product yet. We are still very much in process. So if you spend a day, and when I say a day, I mean a day's work session, whether that's a half an hour, or 2 hours, however much time you can devote to a particular time of, as we professionals say, butt in chair. However much time you spend in the writing chair on a particular day, if your goal is, I got to get out 1,000 words, and you write 1,000 words just so that you can say, I wrote 1,000 words, but you didn't solve any story problems. You didn't come any closer to knowing who your main character is or what their desperate need for personal transformation might be. If you didn't actually create anything usable, if you just brainstormed babbling on the page of 1,000 words and you're like, tick, you can say I achieved my goal, because, but maybe you measured the wrong thing. Maybe a worthier goal, a more useful goal for you that day would have been to say, well, I don't care how much I write today, but I feel like I don't know enough about where my main character lives in the beginning of the book. And I know from my study of story structure that that setting at the beginning of the book is a kind of a representation of what's wrong with my main character's world. This story would not be coming for them, right? The fate, the destiny, the storytelling hand of destiny would not be coming from my main character if they were not in some unsustainable situation, if there wasn't some sense of this being a house of cards that's about to topple. I don't feel that I know enough about that. I'm not clear on what that is. Let me work on that today. Let me really think about what's signified by the setting in the beginning, their home, the people that they're surrounded with. What's wrong? What's missing? You might, on a day like that, have 50 words written. You might have 2,000 words written. You might have something dictated into an app on your phone. You might have done a mood board of pictures. You might have done any number of things in order to achieve your goal, but you didn't necessarily measure them in words. Maybe you can measure that in storytelling. My goal today is to sort out what's the matter with my character at the beginning of the book. I'm not going to write tomorrow because my kids are keeping me busy. So tomorrow's not a writing day. But then the day after that, my goal for that writing day is going to be to really gain some clarity on why they haven't made changes in their lives. If things are so bad, what's the problem? Why didn't Harry Potter just run away from the Dursleys? Why didn't he bust out of his little place under the stair and just run away where he could be happier? Like, what prevented him from doing that, right? Our heroes are in a predicament of some kind, whether they know it or not in the beginning. Why didn't Bilbo Baggins just say, the heck with being a conservative, reputation obsessed hobbit. I want to go have an adventure myself. Why did he have to wait until Gandalf came a knocking with the great adventure of Bilbo's life, right? These are the questions that we want to ask about our characters. So if we set goals where we're going to measure storytelling, we might find ourselves incentivizing quite a different outcome of the day. All right. So you might measure, how much storytelling did I clarify today? That was my goal. All right. You may not, you may be drafting, right? Maybe you have worked out a lot of your story, or at least the early part of your story, enough to get on with, as Tolkien says. You may have worked out the things you need to know to begin. And so you're drafting. And so your day's writing session may, in fact, look a lot like putting words on the page. But it's still draft. And for every 500 words you write, 300 are going to get changed or cut, right? Or maybe 400 will get changed or cut, depending on what your temperament is as a writer. So the measuring of the words, again, it sort of incentivizes the wrong thing. You might be perfectly fine just saying, my goal is to be in the writing chair. I'm sitting in mine right now. I'm going to spend an hour. I'm just going to be in the chair for an hour. I'm going to spend part of that time maybe drafting something new, but I also want to spend part of that time looking at what I wrote yesterday and seeing if I can make it better, if I could build on it, seeing what it reveals to me about where the characters might be going, or things that the story might be offering that I didn't plan, things that might surprise me. So measuring time is a very, very simple way to measure your progress. Spend an hour in the writing chair 3, 4 to 5 times a week. That's a fantastic writing process. All right. So reality-based goals and measure what matters. All right. So those are the 2 tips that we are talking about. I do have a couple more. These are working for you. Let me see. Actually, let me take a moment to check. We've got some. So here's a great little comment bringing in from Terry, who vacillates between going full bore into a story and fixing problems later or revising as I go. And Terry offers, I revise as I go because it seems practical, but sometimes I think I'm getting caught up in minutia. Oh, so relatable. I bet there's a lot of folks who are going to watch this video who are going to relate to that, Terry. So that's a great point to make. Knowing the difference between drafting and revision means that you give yourself permission to draft, truly draft. And then you give yourself permission to revise, truly revise. If you don't have clear reality-based goals about the difference between those two processes, you are gonna get stuck in this, like, little time warp where you keep bouncing back between the two of them. This is the kind of thing that makes self-observation essential. This is one of the things that you should all be self-observing. As you develop your writing process, you will discover what the best balance is between drafting and revising. So now you've got a reality-based understanding of the fact that those are two different things. Now you've got a better understanding of what is it, in fact, that you're trying to measure. It's not just word count. Now you can go back and you can say, okay, if I draft a chapter, do I tend to do better if I then just don't look at it again and draft the next chapter? Or do I find that my drafts are so unfocused? They're still pretty messy, right? They're still pretty mud pie-ish. They're too slippery to build anything new on. I need to shore it up a bit. I need more clarity about the chapter I just drafted before I feel truly confident that I really know what comes next. And so I'm going to mix in drafting days with revision days. I'm going to revise what I wrote already, and it's not ready to go to the publisher. It's just solid enough that I can continue to build on it. That would be my advice, Terry. It's an impulse that's very intuitive that you will have, that you will start to observe in yourself when you know, okay, that draft, the language is a hot mess. I didn't describe anything well. I left some stuff out, but I nailed down what happens and I know that's it. So let me keep going. The language we can always go back and fix. That's one experience versus I drafted this chapter yesterday, but the storytelling is still kind of loose. I'm not really convinced that what happened in that chapter is what I need to have happen. I'm still finding it. Stick with that chapter, because if you continue to build story based on a misdirect, it's like a plane that's in the air and the navigation system is just off a few degrees. It doesn't seem like a lot. But if you're just off by a few degrees and you take off on the East Coast, by the time you get to the West Coast, you're in you're in Canada instead of San Diego, right? Those kinds of small errors magnify over distance. And so if you don't sort out something really crucial about the plot early on, later in the second act, you're going to hit the wall and say, well, now I don't know what to do. And you start unraveling the sweater and you realize that the problem was all the way back in the first act. You set your hero on the wrong mission, or you failed to define a clear mission for your hero, right? These are all story structure problems. So you have to have enough to keep going in the right direction, but you do not have to get bogged down in minutia, as you say. You do not have to find the perfect verb. You do not have to polish the language to a high gleam. You don't have to put anything in iambic pentameter just yet, right? So I hope that makes sense. I'd love to hear in the comments if that helps clarify that. It's something that people really, really get stuck on. So a few more quick tips before we wrap up, and these are very practical, all right? The next thing I want you guys to do is to hack your process, to have more productivity and less self-doubt, is to absolutely set yourself up for success. What do I mean by that? Charge your computer, open the file, right? Have the right tools. If you, if you have an old laptop that crashes every 10 minutes, get a computer. They're not that expensive. Get what you need. You don't need a fancy application designed for writers. Anything that you have that can do word processing is fine. Have it ready to go. Be ready to work. Okay? And look at your environment. Where can you work? Is there a place that appeals to you? Does working outside appeal to you? If you live in a place where you can, sit in a chair on a porch or in the garden or something like that, if that kind of creates that little magic sense of like, oh, I'm in my creativity spot, do it. If you need to find a special creativity spot in your house, find it. Make it special. Put a little candle there, put a little throw pillow on it, drape your favorite scarf over it so that if you get chilly while you're writing, it's right there. Make a space for yourself. Set yourself up for success so that you know that you have a place to go, you have the tools to work. All right. And make a little bit of a plan too. This is something that we can steal from people who get up early in the morning to go to the gym or to go for a run or to get up and do yogas, right? If you get out of bed, you set the alarm at 6 a.m., you're going to get your exercise in, and you can't find your yoga pants. You can't find your sneakers. You don't know where your water bottle is. 15 minutes of fumphing around, trying to gather your things, you're going to be back in bed, right? You're going to say, I can't get it together today. I'm going back to bed. I'll start tomorrow. Relatable? Relatable? Okay. This is what I mean by saying set yourself up for success. Have the things you need to work arranged. If anybody who's raised kids, what do we tell them? Get your backpack the night before. Lay out your clothes the night before. When you got to get up in the morning and get out and do something, make a plan for success. Don't wake up in the morning as if this is the first morning of your life, right? And you're like, oh, I forgot I'm supposed to write. Okay, how do I get that together? No. You've done this before, all right? Lay it out. We all have different reactions to being disorganized. Some people don't mind it. Some people just utterly shut down. And so if you're really one of those people that if there are dishes in the sink, you can't write until you do the dishes, do the dishes before you go to bed at night. Set yourself up for success. Once again, self-observation is the key. You will know the things that pull you off, that distract you, or that make you give up in despair. My computer's not charged and I don't want to sit by the outlet. And, don't let everything become the potential for an excuse. All right. Make a plan that includes two very important things. Also, part of setting yourself up for success. Where are you going to begin working? And how long are you going to stay in the chair? What's the end point? Have a start point and an end point. You might want to take a little, a moment each day, or let's say evening before, to plan the next day. Like, all right, today I did a pretty good job drafting chapter 3. So I'm going to make a plan that tomorrow when I sit down to work, I'm going to spend 10 minutes reviewing what I wrote today, but I'm going to start drafting chapter 4. Just decide where you're going to begin. Again, don't open up the file of your work in progress and say, okay, where was I? What am I supposed to do today? Make a plan about where you're going to begin. And make a plan about where you're going to end. Even if you've got a lot of time, it's diminishing returns when we do creative brain work. After a little while, you're just going to descend into, rearranging things that don't need to be rearranged. If you've got a good hour, 90 minutes, and you can be productive, that's amazing. That's like such a great work day. Make use of it. Don't say, I'm going to keep going until. Stop while you still have some gas in the tank and give yourself a pat on the back. Whatever it is that you plan to get done on that day, you got done. And then you set yourself up for success the next time. Think of the difference in your mood when you're like, I can't wait to get back to this. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow, book. Like, that's a great way to be. And then it's all set up. You're ready to go back to work. Awesome. Versus like, I wrote until I'm stuck. And then what's going to happen tomorrow? You're going to open it up and you're going to be back in the stuck place. So that's all part of making a plan. 2 more quick tips. One is to remember that your brain that we talked about is in your body. I realize this sounds self-evident, but to some people it's not. They think that they can do brain work consistently, productively every day without ever taking care of their body. Alas, no, your brain is in your body. What does that mean? If you are exhausted, if you are not getting enough sleep, if you are eating junk, if you have, if you don't even, if idea of exercise is to like walk from the sofa to the bed and back again, your body is not vibrant. Your level of energy is not at its best. And that will also be true of your brain. It is not realistic or fair to expect your brain, which is part of your body, to somehow magically perform at Olympic level, right? At professional tennis level, if the body that it is part of is not being tended. So I'm not here to give exercise programs or nutrition advice, but I am here to remind you that your brain is part of your body. Basics. Sleep is essential. The brain requires sleep. All right. If you do not sleep, you cannot ask your brain to spring into joyful action. You need to get enough sleep. You also need more self-observation here. You need to know when your brain is most excited about writing. For many of us, it is first thing in the morning. It's not true for everyone, but for many of us, it is. And you must try different times of day. You must experiment to find out when your brain is most fresh, creative, and cheerful about getting to work. If you consistently schedule your writing time at the time of day that your brain literally just needs a nap, this is, this is asking for a long, cold drink of self-doubt, because every time you sit down to work, it's going to feel like an uphill battle, an uphill climb. Self-observe, figure out your best times, work your writing times around when your brain is happiest to do it, and take care of the body that your brain is part of. It's about energy. It's about sharpness. It's about feeling playful and upbeat. We all know how much it impacts our mood. If we're feeling good about ourselves, inside and out, everything seems possible. If we're slinking around saying, oh, I'm just a mess, your brain's part of that. It's not separate from that. Last tip. We started out earlier with the old bad joke about doctor, it hurts when I do this. So let me return to the theme of jokes. A famous, very successful comedian, Jerry Seinfeld, has told in interviews that he's given about how he taught himself to be disciplined about writing jokes. And he created a little diagram or a little chart, his joke chart, and he made it a practice that he was going to write a joke every day. And when he wrote a joke, he got to tick it off on his chart. Now, if you do that and you do 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, 7 days in a row, 30 days in a row, how many check marks do you need to see on that chart before you start to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to break my streak. I've got a 30-day streak going. I've got a 60-day streak. I've been writing a joke every day for 6 months. So pretty soon this goes on for years. It becomes really a daily practice for him. We too need to make a game out of our motivation. You guys know, I hope, that willpower is kind of a myth, that human beings are driven by kind of a complex system of, punishment and reward, but the reward center of the brain is really what's driving us. And there are chemicals involved and all that stuff. What you need to do is you need to find out what gives you that little dopamine rush in the brain that makes you say, oh, I did it and I got a reward. I did it and now I feel good. Not only that, now I want to do it again because last time I did it, I got a reward. I felt good. Even if that feeling good is only like, I checked it off again. I checked off the box. I'm on a streak. I set a goal that I was going to write 4 days a week or 5 days a week or a half an hour every day or whatever it is. And you got to check it off. And now you've got a streak going and you don't want to break it. It's called gamification. right? In behavioral science, they call it gamification, the process of making a game out of doing something in order to build in motivation, consistency. It's it's what we can rely upon when the somewhat illusory concept of willpower fails us, as it eventually will. So that's what I want you to think about, ways to hack your writing process so that you can feel more productive, so that your process can feel fun, like a game, something that you look forward to every day, something that you can just embrace as a normal part of your life, not something that's a struggle, not something that's always triggering self-doubt and resistance every time, but the thing you look forward to doing, your special place, your happy time. Okay, that's what I want your writing to feel like for you. So I'm just going to take a little quick look before we wrap up. If anybody's got any more questions or comments about the writing process. Looks good. I see some. It's great to see that Louise is here. Nice to see you, Wheezy. I am thrilled that you're here. Um, If you come up with more questions or thoughts about this, you can feel free to leave them in the comments below this video. I will answer them. Trying to figure out the right process for us it's a real task. It's not self-evident. And I will circle back now to self-observation as the key. Now I hope that you have a few more things to think about, everything from um, having realistic expectations about what it is you've set out to do, setting yourself up for success, finding a way to add some gamification, right? Some happy streak of success that you can be proud of that will then help build your motivation to keep going back and back and back to it. Self-care, taking care of the whole package that your brain lives in, all this good stuff. All right. So let me know if it's been of use. I hope so. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time here on the Wednesday live streams at 1 p.m. Pacific time. If you're not on my mailing list and you'd like to be, you can hop on over to www.com. Sorry, what did I just say? www.pathofthestoryteller.com. I left out the good part. And just sign up there, so you'll get emails from me once a week and access to some news that's coming up soon. I'm very excited about. I would also love it if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't already subscribed to the channel. Please subscribe. This way you'll be able to get notifications of what we're talking about next. Ring the little bell, get notified so you don't miss it. Okay. Thank you guys so much for coming. It is always a pleasure. I enjoy these talks so much. I will see you next time.